I've been doing historic restoration work for a little over 10 years now, and in that time I've acquired a vast collection of early American tools. Dozens of hand planes of various types, hand saws, hammers, axes. I have not acquired some of the more common everyday tools like mortar pans and levels and such. But we're going to take care of that problem right now.
Using scrap white oak from around the shop, I'm going to build this level. I begin by marking out the very center of what will be the base. I'm using a knife for most of my measurements because it gives a very precise mark. Also, by marking with a knife, my saw has a little bit of a groove to start with, and it's easier to make a straight cut. Of course, this is not going to be a very clean build because I'm just using some tools from my father's shop. A nicer job could be done using things like a shooting board and some of my own hand planes, and maybe in a future video I'll do so. But this is just a quick, easy build that anybody should be able to replicate. Doing a mortise and tenon by hand is very simple and very easy. First, you mark the dimensions of the tenon all the way around. And I generally do the tenon first, and then I use the tenon as a pattern for the mortise. I simply go around the wood stock with a square, just transferring the line all the way around. This will mark the extent of my tenon. Generally, when I make a mortise, sometimes they're a little bit bigger than they need to be, which is fine because the wood will shrink eventually. But to avoid any unsightly gaps, I want to create shoulders all the way around. Where I mark it with a knife, I saw it down to a certain depth. I then take my chisel, and for straight grain lumber like this, you can simply chip it away. And it splits right off, and you have a very clean surface that requires very little extra work. Once the tenon is completely formed, I then lay it on the base and use this actual tenon for the mortise pattern. And now we're ready to create the mortise. The mortises are the most difficult part of the entire process. One slip with these rusty old chisels and the entire thing would be ruined. I pre-drill the corners of the mortise so that chipping out the wood will be much easier and safer. Then, very slowly and deliberately, I use my chisel to take off the first layers of wood, and then I use the knife to complete the process. Once the bulk of the wood is removed, I try to fit the tenon into the mortise. If it's close, I can then shave the tenon a little bit just to make the fit. For this level, I'm going to need two 45-degree supports. This will require a grand total of 4 angled mortise and tenon joints. This is going to be a major challenge with the impositions I've placed on myself. However, it can be done. Everything is done almost exactly as it was for a 90-degree mortise and tenon, except, of course, it's at a 45-degree angle. I pre-drill everything, trying to get the angle as closely as I can with the hand drill. I then chisel it out very slowly and very cautiously because it is far more difficult to clean out a vertical than it is a 90-degree mortise. After a struggle of about 15 minutes, we managed to have all 4 angled mortise and tenon joints complete and ready for the final stage. I put everything back together as tightly as possible. I check the square, check the joints, make sure everything is as tight as possible. I then take everything back apart and mark out exactly where the holes need to go for the wooden pegs. Once I have the position of the holes figured out, I drill the holes for the pegs without having the tenons in the mortises. Once the holes are drilled, I put the tenons back into the mortises for another tight fit, and then I run an ice pick through the holes and mark the position in the tenons. I then pull everything apart once again, and each tenon I change the position of the hole ever so slightly. The objective is to change the position of the hole in the tenon just a little bit, so as I drive the peg, it pulls the tenon into the mortise. And now for the most satisfying part, driving the pins. Due to the position of the holes, every time I drive one of these pegs in, it pulls the joints together very tightly. This adds a great deal of stability to the level and ensures that it will never pull apart. Every peg is very thin and it has a sharp point at the end. And the final step is to set the string. To make it simple, I simply went to the center of the base, which was 14 inches in this case, and marked a line with my square going straight up the vertical board. At the top of this vertical board, I drove a nail around which I tied a string, and on the bottom of this string, I put a temporary cotter key, which I can and will replace with a proper plumb bob at a later date. However, I'm very happy with this, and I'm looking forward to using this in many projects to come. Make sure you click on one of these other awesome projects.